The unisex watch trend is mostly about marketing efficiency. Someone is really excited about the idea that the watch can be marketed to anyone in general and that it'll sell. And they're like excited about not actually having to speak to a specific group, but they can't, because marketing is about finding a specific group, saying something relevant to that group, and it hitting home. I don't know anyone out there that says, I'm only going to buy a unisex watch. They may exist, but I'm saying it's a very small percentage of people. I'm so sorry. You actually have to market to individual groups.
On this week's show, Big Watch, Little Watch cardboard box with a Seiko in it of a yet undetermined price. We make our first visit to eBay Corner, ask #is it okay to like the new Spider-Man AP? No, it isn't. And talk about watches from Bulgari, Hanhart and Panerai. Enjoy the show.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. Ariel and David are both here. Let's start with David. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am not bad either. Thank you for asking. What have you been up to this week? I see a little image that suggests you may have started your watch building project.
No, not really. But what I have is I'm writing about the Russia Knights of the Round Table, and it will be an article unlike others. Let's just put it that way.
What are you bringing? Have you discovered Excalibur or
yeah,
where Arthur
maybe
lived? got the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
Who's playing Guinevere?
Benami is. He's out of a job now.
You know, David, we're not allowed to speak to anyone from the UK about these stories because they get very possessive of it. Like they know the story, we don't, but they know the story.
It's theirs.
We'll now go off for 20 minutes talking about Arthur and that his castle was near where I live and not near where you live. Actually, there is a claim to Camelot being near where I live in Scotland, which does seem the most ridiculous thing that anyone has ever suggested. But there we go. Ariel, how are you?
Well, now I'm thinking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Thank you very much.
I was trying to avoid the references, but I'm glad you went there because it just gives me the chance to talk about the Nights at Sea.
We have so many things next week going on.
Back here,
we got Las Vegas coming up. We have some of the team members are going to be in New York. David's going to be in Paris. I feel like the next time we have this conversation, there's going to be way too many weird new watches that we see. And it's odd because it's like June.
And there's also going to be time for a blog to watch watches. So make sure you all tune into your in-flight movies for some watch reviews.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about Couture. What's happening?
At Couture in Las Vegas, I'd say there's probably about a dozen watch brands that go there. It's mostly a jewelry show. If you're really enterprising, looking for a good deal, it's actually amazing because there's one of the IWJG shows right before, I think it's actually happened today for a few days, which is like where to get, dealer to dealer jewelry and watches. And then they have the antiques show, the antique jewelry and watch show, which is happening at the same time. And this is where you go to get really, really good deals in person. The best deals aren't even online anymore. In fact, I don't really think they are online anymore. They're going to happen in person. And then, of course, you have the show where a lot of brands go. And yes, there's going to be new watches, but it's also where we get to have a little bit more of a civilized conversation compared to Watches and Wonders, which is like go, 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 go. So this is when we spend a few days having a really long time to get to know brands, to know what's going on. Big groups, Shinola is going to be there, and Citizen, Casio, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity there to sort of discuss things. So the Japanese brands, seeing what's going on with them outside of Grand Seiko, we really haven't had any formal opportunities to see anyone because Grand Seiko is at Watches and Wonders. So we'll see what goes on, but we've been going to this for over 10 years now. David's been before. It's a worthwhile event. I think it's a good time.
Good stuff. And David, you're going to Paris. Can you tell us what you're going to Paris for?
I'm going to Paris because Breguet is launching something new. I'm not sure if we're supposed to say what it is, but you guys will learn about it. If not next week, then the week after that.
Breguet launching something new, that seems slightly oxymoronic.
Well, it's based on something that they've made for some time. It's true.
Okay, so when we say new, we mean they're reaching back into the archives. It's not like they're coming up with a sports watch or a connected watch.
Probably not a connected Breguet, no. Although that would be hysterical. It's antiquated enough now.
That's right. It's been going for 40 years. Yeah. We can now make a connected Breguet. Well, look out on the site for all of that. Our topic for this week to get us going is from Jake's article on Monday, and this is his From the Comments series. Smaller watches aren't going to hurt you. David, Are smaller watches going to hurt you?
They are yet to hurt me. Large watches have hurt me. You can have them dig into your wrist or get caught on something and do something like that. It's stuff that people tend to survive. It's not that bad, but it's annoying. And smaller watches are less likely for that to happen. So, yeah, who knows? But I don't think they are out there to hurt you either.
Have they hurt your pocket at all? The reduction in sizes of watches that you maybe liked but wouldn't have worn, that they're now coming out in smaller sizes, is that now something, are there more watches that have appealed to you? Do you prefer a smaller watch to a larger watch?
It's not that. It's that some watches that I like that were under the radar are coming up in price now with the smaller watch trend and getting traction. So that's what's happening.
So you think that because people are getting into wearing smaller watches, smaller watches would probably mean what, 36, 35,
36. Yeah, I think I would say at 38 and under.
38, because these are becoming more popular, the prices are going up.
Yes, of the older versions as well. So if you look at something from 10, 20, 30 years ago and they're making essentially the same watch today, then of course that will pull up the resale values of older watches as well. So that happens sometimes.
Right. People with smaller wrists probably eat less, so they can afford it. The savings they make on food and other things. They're wearing they're wearing children's-sized clothes and smaller shoes and things. They've got the extra cash spare to spend on these smaller watches. Ariel, let's hear how animated you can get about this debate of first world problems that are smaller watches versus bigger watches.
Oh man, it really is a first world problem. When I first started getting into watches was an era where we were moving from a smaller size to a larger size. So a lot of the men's watches were averaging about, maybe 36 to 40 millimeters, I would say. And then the late 90s and the early 2000s, you started to see watches get a lot bigger. Panerai had a lot to do with that, and 42 and 44 or even higher, 45, 46 millimeters started to become very popular. And a lot of it was because watches like this didn't really exist. Outside of a lot of specialized sport watches, it was hard to get a large daily wear. And I know this because I was buying a lot of watches on eBay at the time or just sort of looking in general. And I noticed that a lot of watches I otherwise would like had diameters that were like 37, 38 millimeters, which was a totally standard men's watch size, which was not considered large at all. During most of the 1990s, 40 millimeters would have been considered large, 42 even larger. And again, 44, you didn't really have a lot of timepieces at all that were made in that size. So I think there was several years of a flirtation and sort of an interesting exploration of what it was like to wear these larger watches. And there's a lot of fun for it. And then the pendulum swings back and everyone who is exclusively wearing larger watches realizes they sort of miss out. And I think what's strange is sort of all or nothing approach, or the fact that a size is trendy. I think what it really is every individual person has sizes they do or don't like, and there's things that do or don't work. You should be testing a lot of different watch sizes all the time, and like pants or shoes or any other type of thing which fits on your body, there is no one size fits all. So the idea that people get very emotional when someone else likes a different size on them, it's like getting upset because someone has a different shoe size than you. Like it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think it does present a very big challenge for brands when they're trying to figure out like what size to make a watch or what size people want. And I think that the question needs to be turned back around, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this. But certain watches just look good in different sizes. Sometimes like it looks great in 36 and then you have it in 40 and like the proportions are off and it's weird. So does the watch look good in the size? And some watches look great big. Others don't look so good big. And then, does it look silly on you? Your eyes are the judge. I mean, I have an issue where I'll wear a lot of watches that are too small and I won't be able to leave the house with it. I'll be like, oh, I'm not wearing long sleeves because it just feels small for me. Maybe you, Rick, or David looking from the side would be like, Ariel, that looks fine. But for something in my mind, it looks too small. And I'm like, darn, I really wanted to wear it, but it just didn't go with sort of how I felt. And again, it's a very personal thing. So I think that people should definitely try different sizes, but there's no correct size. And the idea that you would scrutinize someone because they're wearing a different size than you like is kind of absurd, right?
The thing about watch sizes, unlike everything else that you wear, like you can't wear shoes that are too big for you. You look like a clown. You can't wear a shirt that's too small for you. You look stupid. All your fat bits will stick out the sides. Like it is the one thing you wear that you can wear different sizes of and potentially not look stupid.
That's an excellent point.
You know, you can't wear things that are the wrong size, but you can wear a watch that's different size. I also think that actually a lot of what this falls down to is that Jake, David, Ed, myself, I've not actually been there with you, Ariel, when we've been to the Bulgari stand, is that fundamentally we all want an excuse to wear the Serpente and be able to get away with it. Because I've yet to see a guy try on what is clearly a women's designed watch in the Serpente and not go, oh, I really wish I could wear that.
I mean, we've worn it. David and I have, at least. I mean, I know. I've worn it in front of a group of people, and they all be like, too much arm hair. And I'm like, you're right.
It's when the veins in the back of your wrist are the same size as the width of the strap of the watch that it starts to become a little bit odd looking. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely team large watch. I think, Ariel, you're team large watch as well. I wear a 44mm Panerai pretty much 95% of the time. And so putting on a smaller watch, it's not just the problem of wearing a smaller watch for me. It's the problem of I'm so used to looking at a larger watch that a smaller watch looks really small. It's
psychological, right? Like there's something in your brain where you're like, it doesn't look right. And like, it's not about big or small. It's just like, it just doesn't look right.
Also, I'm short-sighted or long-sighted, whatever one it means that if I've got my glasses on, etc. And I can read a Panerai without my glasses. Anything else is too small.
Okay, don't make it about legibility. You're just adding fuel to the fire to the opposite argument. They're going to be like, get LASIK, pal.
Yeah, but, well, legibility is an interesting question, though. To what extent does it matter how legible it is? Because there's no doubt as watches get smaller, presumably they get harder to read.
I mean,
is that true?
There's so many other factors than dial size, how cluttered the dial is, contrast. I mean, I think that if we're going to focus on the argument to where a larger watch is easier to read, I mean, you have to have really bad vision.
So is there then, because Jake kind of posits this at the start of the article about the lines starting to fade between women's watches and men's watches. I don't think it's fading.
Not according to men.
As quickly.
It's true. It's more women are wearing men's watches. The opposite isn't happening.
Is the reality not that unisex is now the new women's watch?
I mean, people need terms. I've written about this extensively, and we've even talked about it, where the unisex watch trend is mostly about marketing efficiency. Someone is really excited about the idea that the watch can be just marketed to anyone in general and that it'll sell. And they're like excited about not actually having to speak to a specific group, but they can't, because marketing is about finding a specific group, saying something relevant to that group, and it hitting home. And most of the people who buy watches identify as either a man or a woman. And so you have men that want a men's watch, and then you have women that want a women's watch or a men's watch. I don't know anyone out there that says, I'm only going to buy a unisex watch. They may exist, but I'm saying it's a very small percentage of people. So there's no actual consumer demand for unisex watches. It's just, like I said, this attempt, in my opinion, to be more efficient when it comes to marketing, but it's a fantasy. You can never actually get that efficient. I'm so sorry. You actually have to market to individual groups.
So what's the future? Look into your crystal ball, both of you. What happens? Does the trend reverse?
It's a naming convention. The watches don't change. It's just people are going to stop saying this silly thing. Look, at some point, retailers, they make these decisions. They say terms. Like if they say the term automatic, and that helps them sell watches, they keep saying the term automatic. And that, again, I think self-winding actually is a little bit more effective than automatic sometimes, but it doesn't matter. If they keep saying unisex and the consumer doesn't flinch, they're just going to stop saying it. So I actually can't predict. I don't think a lot of consumers respond that well to it. And if my prediction is correct, then the term will just stop being used because it doesn't move people emotionally in any way.
And what happens to watch sizes in the next 5 years? Do we flip? Do Hollywood release another movie with The Rock and he wears some 55mm Panerai? Or
there's a place for everything in the market. Everything in the market has a place, and we know that. Everything in the market. And so there's space for watches at all sizes. There are wearers for them out there. I mean, again, there are some watches that we've all worn that have been too big, and we've definitely worn some that are too small. I think the danger is a brand being like, okay, 40 millimeter, that's the thing. Let's design watches around it. No, design a beautiful watch and then aesthetically ask yourself what proportions flatter that size the most. I think that's really the way to go. So if there's variety, I will be happy. If people just say watches should be big or watches should be small, that, in my opinion, is the problem.
But is there anything to note of the fact that while all the geeks are talking about how watch sizes are getting smaller, David, I know you have a particular thing about the future of smaller gold watches, that Rolex are actually making their watches gradually ever so slightly bigger now?
Yeah, but they're in a 15-year delay. Always have been, so that's fine. That just proves the point.
So Rolex are behind rather than ahead?
In some ways, yes.
If there was a particular watch that you could have made larger or smaller, is there anything that springs to mind? For me, I would like to see the Squadra come back, effectively the larger Reverso, because I think that's a cool watch, personally. I'll fight you all in the comment section if you wish.
That was very cool, but ungainly to wear, at least I found.
Anything in your realm you think, yep, that's a watch I would have worn or would have bought had it been either bigger or smaller?
Some crazy IWCs in ceramic I would wear if they were smaller. A lot of them, some perpetual, some not, some just basic chronos I find. I look them up and I'm like, oh, they're so amazing, so cool, 45, 47, and they're just way too large. And I would love to see IWC make something smaller. Yeah, maybe we will see them do that.
Okay, Ariel, any size issue that's ever put you off a watch?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I'm constantly wearing watches that I think are the wrong size, but that's okay because I have just one wrist. And, I think that you go out there and you find the watches that work for you. There's enough of them. There's enough watches that if I had, to wear a different watch for several years in a row, I could definitely do that and have watches that fit my wrist. So yeah, it's a shame when the right watch comes around and it's just not sized for you. But you know what? There's another person out there who that watch is going to look perfect on. And so that makes it okay.
Good stuff. Well, go and check out that article from Jake this week. Do leave your thoughts in the comment section. We have, at the last minute, a Seiko PR flash. So it seems only fair. We were going to play Guess the Price of the Seiko on the article on the Seiko Prospex SPB 333J1, but which is a very nice watch, we'll talk about it in a moment, but in the last 5 minutes a Seiko PR flash has dropped in, so this means there can be no cheating amongst you two. So I'm going to read out the specification. Which
happens all the time. I just want to say for everyone listening, multiple times has a Seiko watch just been released before we do the show, which goes back to the problem that Seiko's releasing watches way too fast. That's part of our point. Love you, Seiko. Way too fast with the releases. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, and just to make it even worse, this is a King Seiko. So just when you thought we had Seikos and Grand Seikos and the King Seiko was going to be a special, clearly Seiko are determined to push in to the whole King Seiko thing again. So this is a King Seiko. It is apparently inspired by a classic KSK, whatever that is. It is a slimline caliber, so it's a 6L35.
Oh, jeez.
Which is the first appearance of this in a King Seiko. Okay, so that's your starter for 10. There are 2 versions of this watch being released, one in white, one in black. The size is 38.6, so definitely in the small watch category. 45 hours power reserve, steel, water resistance of 5 bar. They're pushing into the anti-magnetic side of it. The question though is, where have they priced this at? Now I'm going to need to ask you to do this in euros, because it's what's been provided to us.
Oh, jeez.
So in euros, for the SJE 089 King Seiko, Ariel, what are you paying?
Like about 1,000 euros?
I'll go with 2,000.
You'll go with 2,000 euros. Well, if you were to add both of your prices together, you still couldn't afford it.
What?
Because this is priced at 3,400 euros. So, go figure.
How did they come up with that? I have no idea.
It's a 6L35. That's why it's a fancier movement. That's the only giveaway. But I was still off by 50%. Okay, so
No, nobody can think of why.
Okay,
though.
okay. Let me say this. I know that they're great. I'm sure it has advantages, but I still haven't determined how movements like that are more effective or more desirable than sort of like a 2824 or something like that. It could be, or maybe even a 2892. But you don't need to spend that much to get a watch with a 2824 or 2892. So I guess I'm just not understanding how this is, how you can command that. I know that there's sort of a hierarchy at Seiko. And again, I'm not saying that any of us have the answer, but like this is a question that a lot of people have. It's like, okay, you have my attention. Could you please explain why? And I'm not sure that Seiko's doing an amazing job at that.
Yeah.
Who's buying these?
Kings.
I mean, who is? Yeah, but who is going into a shop and dropping €3,500 on a King Seiko like this, as opposed to like even a Grand Seiko?
What if your initials were KSK? You basically have to buy it, right?
Yes, yeah, you're obliged, but you get a discount.
If your initials are KSK, then reach out to the show. We'll see if we can set you up with a discount.
So it's like a 6L35. It's accurate to -10 to +15 seconds per day. Has a 45-hour power reserve. It's admirably slim, but still, it's like $3,500. So. Or even more, because that was euros. It's like a $4,000 watch almost, which is just a lot for one of these. So I think, to answer your question, or if someone goes into a boutique and they look at Seiko and they don't want to buy the cheap stuff because they've already had those, they can't get stretched to a Grand Seiko, and then they end up with something like this.
Okay.
I guess.
That's like you're right, but it's like, when are the cards going to fall exactly that way?
Well, I don't know.
There's been a little bit of an interruption there because I had to pop outside, and in the interim, David and Ariel have been surfing eBay and have found a particularly interesting store.
What do you mean in the
which they are
interim?
now-
All I do is surf eBay.
Okay, fair enough. So this is. Do you want to tell us how you came across this eBay store?
Well, I'll search for strange things from time to time on eBay, and then I'll notice that like one store will have a few of the watches I'm looking at. I'm like, wait a minute, and then I'll see who it is. So I don't know. I don't actually know who a lot of these people are, and much of the time I'll get excited, and then like the store's in like Japan. So if it's in the United States, I'm like, that's cool. Like, I don't know what it is, but like me and Japanese watch lovers, we are like, our tastes overlap so much. I feel like maybe something, I should have been born in Japan. I don't know. Like, we have the exact same watches. Like, David, you notice that? Like, I go there and like I like all the same watches.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Remember what that tome was, like 4,000 word tome on shopping for watches in Tokyo? Because I was just like, I want someone else to be excited about this too.
Yes. Exactly. I desperately want to go to Japan and just shop around for watches. I would go broke there for sure. That's for sure.
Well, you found this fairly local to you, I think, the Suter House, which appears to have some watches on it that
you mean
have
across
been
the country
obsessing over.
local? Yeah, super local. Florida and California, just neighbors practically.
Just round the corner. Anyway, you've been finding some extraordinary stuff in here. So for those of you that want to play along at home, log on to eBay. This is not a sponsor, by the way. This has just happened because I had to leave the recording studio for a moment. Tell us what you found.
You have to look at this, the one that I just sent. This Aquanautic. Okay. Again, Octo translates into Hungarian, and I'm not sure what some of these were in English. But it's wow! It reminds me of a Monte Grappa, that made love to an alien, and then the alien had indigestion, and then somehow this whole thing came. It's unbelievable.
Did you say the alien had indigestion? That's an awful lot of like fantasy anatomy knowledge.
Yes. It's all made up, but you can call it knowledge. Wow, look at this. You have to see it.
This is now just turning into things we found on eBay.
I tried to make a whole show concept about this. I mean, we've even done these with eBay, where we've done these various types of videos where we just shop on eBay for the video. David and I have done them because it can be quite an enjoyable thing to just see what you can find. Sometimes you buy stuff, but like you learn an awful lot. And for me, I'm like seeing my age, where I'm like, oh, I remember when that came out when I was first first getting to watches, and now it's like, oh, this vintage so-and-so. I'm like, wait a minute, early 2000s is vintage now? And I guess in a way it is.
Yes. KSP2202. That's the one you want to Google. KSP2202. You have to see that. It even came on the bracelet. These guys were out of control.
One of the things that I think is really important about eBay is you see which watches or brands that just came out are a flop, right? Not saying their watches are bad, but what you have a lot is a watch brand will come out and then all of a sudden quietly you'll see their stuff on eBay for like at least 60% off. Like I'm seeing watches right now like on various types of stores we're looking at like, close to 80% off of retail. And I'm not saying that those are necessarily authentic retail prices, but the bottom line is that there are a lot of deals. And so it amuses me where people like only know to look for the very hot in demand watches. I think the behavior that people need to do is what David and I are doing is just sort of, mess around on eBay and find things. I mean, the one you found, that the Yerman and Stüby, the hole-in-one watch. This thing came out about 20 years ago. It was a mechanical watch, allowed you to track your golf game. No one talked about it until Hublot did something substantially similar for a way higher price point. So it's often the times that the big popular brand will make something a hit, but they're rarely first. And I think that if there's a complication or a material or something you like, there's some brand out there that has it for significantly less than Cartier.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll maybe make an eBay corner every so often.
Yeah. No, but there's amazing stuff in here for like if you want to spend between $1,000 and $2,000, like if that is your budget, the amount of insane stuff that you can buy in watches on eBay will just blow your mind. I mean, there's tens of thousands, but like that price point alone between $1,000 and $2,000. You can even order eBay's it's their authenticity guaranteed. There's a version that's under that you pay $80 for, and they do the whole service. Totally worth it. Yeah.
I want to know what happens if you buy one of these. Like, so this KSP 2202 is $1,000. So you buy that, you pay the extra $80 to get it authenticity guaranteed. What happens to the poor watchmaker when this arrives on his desk, being asked, oh, is this authentic? What on earth is he checking it against? Going, oh yeah, we've got stock photos of what this should look like. Dear.
That's a good question. I mean, I was actually under the logic many years ago that if a watch was pretty niche, there's no chance that there's like anybody that even wanted to fake it. And then I started being shown some of the websites where fakes were sold, and I was like, amazed at how niche they were getting. Like there were watches that like I don't even know that anybody wanted them, and they were making fakes about it. And like I was impressed at their like industriousness, I guess. But maybe there's this whole weird world of people that want. It's like they don't want to spend $1,000 on it, but $500 they'll do. And maybe there's someone out there that'll make them. So it's strange to me.
But a lot of that's because it's not fake in the way that you would maybe think it would have been fake 20 years ago, in that the whole thing was made up. A lot of these fakes are probably using the same parts as the real thing, like maybe the case, because the case is made just down the road from wherever they're assembling the fake. So they can build the basic building blocks, which is the case and the strap, and then fill it with whatever movement they can come across. But because the cases are made nearby, they can actually get hold of them at cost or out of a truck out the back door of the factory. So yeah, I would love someone to buy one of these extraordinary watches and get it authenticity guaranteed. Maybe we should approach eBay for a wee test. Go on, authenticity guarantee this.
We will discuss that with them for sure. Geneva-based watchmaker Raymond Weil invites you to discover the beautiful caliber RW1212 automatic movement. Designed exclusively for Raymond Weil in Switzerland, the RW1212 features an exposed balance wheel symmetrically positioned on the dial under a traditional watchmaker's bridge. Inspired by the world's great musical composers and instrumentalists, Raymond Weil harmoniously integrates the RW1212 movement into a family of products that now also includes the visually captivating RW1212 skeleton. Raymond Weil is a family-owned and operated company that for more than 45 years has been celebrating independent watchmaking for enthusiasts everywhere. Visit raymond-weil.com to see more.
We were going to talk about the Seiko Prospex SPB 333J1. We were going to run the guess the price of the Seiko on this. We won't bother. It's a very nice little dive watch. It's $1,000 or thereabouts. With all the stuff that's going on with Seiko, with all the releases, I'm saying this isn't a new thing, but it's probably becoming more obvious to the rest of the watch community, just because we keep on talking about it, just how much product is coming out of Seiko Group. Is it just a distraction now? Would it stop you buying a Seiko because you'd be worried about, well, what's the next thing going to come along? And is it going to look just as good and be just good, but be half the price or double the price because you can't figure out what's what within the brand?
I think it's a legitimate concern. I know that for myself, I like to take a little bit more time to evaluate whether or not something is a good idea for me. And I definitely am put on hold with a lot of the Seikos. It's not that they're not nice. A lot of them are great, but I'm sometimes confused as to what'll come out next. So I, for one, I think I do stop, and I think it would prevent me from buying anything that just came out. I'd buy something that was maybe a few years old, happily being able to know where they were going with that collection and that there wasn't too much great stuff after it. But yeah, I think that I'd be real hesitant about buying just released Seiko stuff right now.
I think they are aiming at a totally different audience. That's the thing. If people are going to malls or boutiques, shop there or online or whatever, they don't really care. They just want to find an ideal watch, a companion they can trust and buy and just rely on and forget about shopping for another one, a week or a month or a year later. And I think they're just trying to throw all these things at the wall and see, what sticks and just move on. But for us, people who care about Seiko and Grand Seiko, it's very confusing and quite alarming.
Well, go and check out the article on the website for the new dive watch from Seiko. Now, we touched last week a little bit on AP and whether this is the outgoing CEO just getting it all out of his system. But we have a new release from AP, which is the Royal Oak Concept Tourbillon Spider-Man watch. I'm going to ask it, hashtag, is it okay? I actually quite like this.
I'm not sure if it's okay. There's nothing wrong with Spider-Man at all. I don't know if they made this watch for the right reasons. I guess that's the point. It's cool looking, but I think the reason why something is made is good. The designer had a vision. They really wanted to make something cool. They wanted to innovate. Other than simply being an Audemars Piguet Tourbillon with Spider-Man and trying to somehow benefit from what that means, who really wants this watch? This is a marketing exercise, and if it makes people very happy to wear, all the better. But I think this watch was made for not the reasons we tend to want watches to be made for.
I mean, it's 195,000 Swiss francs. Does anybody know where that sits in the world of concept Royal Oak tourbillons? Is there a big price uplift in this because it's got Spider-Man on it?
I mean, the question really is how much Marvel characters and pop culture characters can push people to get watches in the way that maybe a celebrity would wearing it or something like that. It's, again, as David said, it's a lot of it is experimentation. We're talking about Seiko, and here, if it sells and people buy it, I don't know that anybody needs any more validation than that. Good taste is not only something that, has never been a barrier to commercialism, but is disagreed upon by reasonable people. We can all sit there and have a disagreement on what good taste means. So I don't think we're going to win any arguments that it should have been made. But if you're having a discussion about, tools that you appreciate being made for the right reasons, I don't know that anybody was trying to be oh, Spider-Man needs a mechanical wristwatch and we made it. No, that's not what this is. This is a tourbillon with a sculpture of Spider-Man in the middle, and that's what it is. It's nothing deeper than that.
Okay, Ari 5000 from the comment section. Omega, nobody can top the embarrassing debacle we made teaming up with Swatch. Audemars Piguet, hold my Chardonnay. Is this embarrassing?
To some people, I can see a lot of people legitimately having a sort of visceral like reaction, like it's like of disgust, because it's not what people always think when they want to consider like a proud, timeless design that will sort of look good in all corners of the world. I mean, Marvel characters are about as pedestrian as it gets. It's the opposite of luxury. This idea of elite, you know, high taste, only you have to be in the know to appreciate it. You know, this is a merger of, I guess, high horology, but with something which, you know, is about as pedestrian as it gets. You know, a Marvel character which has been around for a long time. So recognizable, sure, a lot of motion, sure. Luxury, and I think that's where some of the distaste comes from, because I don't think that this is luxury in the sense that a lot of us think about luxury or what we want it to be. And it challenges you. And I think that that's good. It challenges us. We have a reaction. We're asking ourselves, do we like this? And some people are saying absolutely not. And some people are saying yes. And Audemars Piguet wins. Like, no doubt Audemars Piguet is a winner here because people are talking about it and noticing it. And it doesn't, I mean, frankly, like, it's not making you like a nice Royal Oak any less. You know, you're like, okay, this is the brand that did that, so we might not like this, but it doesn't. That's the thing, I think, which is why they did it. It will not hurt the demand for the Royal Oak. And as long as they don't hurt Royal Oak demand, they can do whatever the hell they want.
See, this is where I query as to whether that's true, because this watch will escape into pop culture just like the Black Panther one did. It'll be worn by some basketball star or rapper or whatever it is, and it will seep out into the zeitgeist of people who aren't surfing Instagram for watches, but are surfing Instagram for their favorite baseball, basketball, name your American sport. And they'll see this watch. And the problem comes when the person who bought the like Royal Oak self-winding perpetual calendar for 140 grand gets stopped in the street by some kid that said, "Oh, nice watch. Oh, is that the brand that produced the one with the Spider-Man on it?" And that's the point at which the guy that spent 140 grand on the perpetual calendar goes, "Wait a minute, this brand is now not being appreciated for what this watch is, but is being appreciated for the fact that they also produce a watch with Spider-Man on it." And I think when that happens, that's what starts to diminish the value that they've built in this highly exclusive brand. I mean, if you're only producing 50,000 watches a year, why take the risk of doing this to your brand? Because I think that's what it is. Doesn't stop me liking it, but the reality is, you know, you get into a conversation with anybody who's got a Royal Oak just now, and you're going to ask them what do they think of the Black Panther and the Spider-Man watch, and that kind of thing seeps and sticks to a brand. So I think it's a dangerous route.
Let me share this. I hear what you're saying. What I would have liked to see is a watch that the Black Panther would have wanted to wear, or a timepiece that Spider-Man would have wanted to wear. And I again, these are fantasy characters, but I'm imagining that Spider-Man doesn't want to look down at his wrist and see his own face on it, right? Like, does he need to be reminded like who he is or what role he has? Like, it would match his suit and his theme. It might have some functional element, but like, it wouldn't just be a souvenir watch with his face on it. So for me, that's the biggest disappointment, that Audemars Piguet couldn't take these wonderful characters and take something about their aesthetic, their costume, the materials, and build it into the watch, and then maybe on the back of it have the face of the thing or something like that. But like, that it's just a sculpture in the same way that like Jacob and Company makes little, you know, astronauts. Like this watch makes Jacob and Company watches look far more tasteful and sophisticated by comparison. And that's just kind of, again, and a lot of them really are. But when you say that something from Audemars Piguet elevates a watch like the Astronomia that's had like tarantulas in it and stuff like that, like, you know, that's a big thing to say.
Yeah, I think the phrase you used there is dead right. It's a souvenir watch. Admittedly, it's a really expensive souvenir. It's not the sort of thing you get at a gumball machine, but it's a souvenir watch. David, do you have any thoughts on this matter?
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. On trying to link it to some, something they would wear, the character would wear, as opposed to just slapping it on there. It's the most basic thing to do. Like, oh, is it a Spider-Man watch? What do we do? Put Spider-Man on it. It's like, this is the 101 thing to do, and it's rather basic. And I agree with you, Rick, when you say that it's the association. Like, somebody else buying a completely different watch from AP does not necessarily want to be associated with others. The type of clientele, the 100 of them, or however many they make of these Black Panther and Spider-Man watches, is out there. They're completely different clientele. And I think this is why this is a dangerous game. But also I understand and I respect the fact that, they're trying to sexy up the brand a little bit and make it more entertaining and make it more than just a Royal Oak brand that can stamp out a bunch of steel watches that look like, exactly the same way as they did 50 years ago. So again, it's part of me wants to encourage other brands to do stuff like this that is playful and is out there. But I, at the same time, also can relate to those AP customers who are now ditching their APs, their Royal Oaks or something like that, because they chose those watches at a time when AP was not a Marvel brand.
Okay, well, go and leave your thoughts on the website. Well, what do we think will come next? Do we think this is it? Do you think that old CEO is out? This will be the last we see of it?
Oh yeah. You think Mrs. Procter and Gamble is gonna be hot on this? I just can't see her. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she's the giant comic book fan, but I feel like this is a project that started a while ago. They already did the thing with Marvel, and they probably still have the relationship. But for all I know, another one or two of these could be set in motion. But I don't think that the company right now is going to be like, what we need to do? A bunch more comic book characters. Like, just not sure that this is going to be repeated.
Do Procter and Gamble have any character associated with them?
Geez.
Do any of their brands?
I could make a bunch
brands
of...
like have
the superhero of greenwashing, probably.
Yeah.
They also, Procter. Never mind. I was going to go somewhere with some of the brands that Procter and Gamble make, but I'll not bother.
They're an easy target, right?
There is fairly easy targets in there. Should you choose, I'll just name Pampers, etc., etc. I mean, they make Flash, so they could do a tie-in with DC, with the DC universe and the Flash. But there we go. So hopefully that's the last we see of that. David, you have had a hands-on, I think, for quite a wee while, I think.
Yes.
With the Bulgari Octo Finissimo skeleton, 8 days, ultra thin in titanium.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
It was a full review, actually, with a bunch of pictures and thoughts and comments on it. So I would highly recommend that people check it out if they want to get to know the Octo Finissimo better. It's the 8 days. It's less than 6 millimeters thick. So it's not as thick, not as thin as some other Octo Finissimos, but it's thin enough. It's in sandblasted titanium and skeletonized. It's fantastic in some ways and raises some questions in other fields. So yeah, I think it's worth taking a look. And it is a marvel, actually. And I think, the core takeaway message from this review is the fact that this would be an amazing object just to own and collect and have around the house and just go there and look at it and admire it. And the fact that it's a watch and you can put it on your wrist and you can have it around is even better. But just the way it's made and the way it's constructed and all that it knows and it can do, 8 days power reserve in a movement that's like 2.5 millimeters thick or something like that. It's just something that I found myself looking at and trying to figure out how they made it and reverse engineered in my mind. And I just kept finding more and more amazing details the more I looked at it. So again, it's a fantastic object to have, and it just happens to be a watch.
One of the things about the Octo Finissimo is it is one of these watches that does, I think, very easily when you put it on, whether it suits you or not. It's a very distinctive shape. And I think a lot of people love this watch. I don't know many people that I don't like this watch. But a lot of people love this watch. And then they try it on and they go, I just can't wear that. I'm kind of 50-50. I think I probably could wear some of them. But some of them are just either a bit too blingy or they just feel a bit different. How practical and everyday watch did you feel this is? I mean, it's not a small watch. It does, what does it measure out as? I mean, it's square, so it's...
It's said to be 40, but it's, with square watches, you always have to take that with a grain of salt. So it's a large watch, but because it's so thin, it literally finds its way under a cuff or a sleeve or something like that. So it's not like something that you have that you're always, beating up against something else or anything like that. So it just crawls under the sleeve and it's not cumbersome. The links are very narrow. They are wide, but they are very narrow in the sense that there's lots of them. So it follows the curvature of the wrist. The clasp actually folds into the links. So the last few links on either side of the bracelet are hollowed out so that the clasp folds into them, which is a very clever little execution, because otherwise the clasp and the bracelet together would be thicker than the watch itself. So again, little details like this are really cool. And to answer your question, it's great to have around. It's a fun watch to wear on a daily basis. It's not something that, you can totally wear it. I mean, it's 8 days power reserve. It's legible. It's comfortable. What more do you want?
And you don't feel protective of it. I just wonder, a lot of times in these thin watches, Ariel, you were with, is it Piaget you were with recently?
Yeah.
Wearing some of their ultra thins?
Yeah, the Altiplano Ultimate Concept as well as the Automatic.
Yeah, and the thing that always worries me about really thin watches is, do you become overly worried about just destroying them?
No, not at all.
Oh.
I felt that way with some of the even slimmer Octo Finissimos, but not this one.
It depends on the watch. David's right. Like some of them I've worn, I was like, oh my god. But other, like the Piaget at like 4.3 millimeters thick. Okay, the Concept, which is 2 millimeters, is nuts. There's the Citizen EcoDrive 1, which is their 1 millimeter thick watch, which I like. I don't wear too often, but I like a lot. And again, it's 1 millimeter thick. Nothing's thinner than that. And they did a bunch of engineering that's, honestly pretty impressive to make sure that it's, not going to bend. But if you want a durable watch, do not go under about 4 or 5 millimeters thick.
Because it's a skeletonized watch, I think that also makes me feel nervous because you can see all the things and you can see how all the cogs and wheels nest together and the very fine tolerances in that. Actually being able to see that also sometimes makes me nervous, because it's like, surely if I knock this off of something, everything's just going to overlap itself and spring out of position. Like, I'd almost rather it was covered over so I didn't have to witness.
It's not untrue. I mean,
this poor watch through.
We'll talk about it more in another conversation, but you can't just assemble an ultra thin movement as you would a normal thicker movement. It requires a very special assembly, certain types of techniques. It's extremely frustrating. Most watchmakers need a lot of special training. So, ultra thin really is a grand complication in a lot of ways. It's not very well understood that way, but it's a lot harder to do than it looks.
Cool. David, at €23,000, if you had €23,000, would you be considering this for yourself?
I would try on all the Octo Finissimos before I would pull the trigger on this, because they do wear differently, they look different. So I'm still very tempted by the sort of the base of the Finissimo Automatic. I think that's the one I would go towards. But if I had this much money and I had one of those already, then I'd be tempted to get this one.
I don't wish to call you out as being a liar, David, but surely if you had the money, you just buy the Tsujima.
Oh, that's right, actually. Probably I'd just go straight to Tsujima.
Straight to Tsujima. It's cheaper as well, is it not?
Yeah. In its reflective glory. I wonder if they sold out. I'm sure they sold out really fast. Oh my goodness.
We'll have a look on eBay and see if there's any Tsujimas for sale.
Is that the one with the mirrored dial?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome watches.
Yeah, those are cool.
So they are on Chrono 24 from 12,000. All of them are in freaking Japan. There are two in the US at like 18K.
Right, okay. They sold originally for $14K, I think. $14,100, I think, was what they sold for originally. So there you go. Go check out the Tsujima edition. I think David did an article on that back in the day.
Jack Mason is a Dallas, Texas-based watch brand founded in 2015. Last year, they made a big splash in the watch community with the launch of their Strato Timer GMT, which featured the Miyota Caliber 9075 movement. It sold out quickly. On the heels of that success, Jack Mason has launched a new dive watch based on the Strato Timer platform. Currently on pre-order, the all-new Hydro Timer 300 meter features a no-date up-to-date dial with the Miyota caliber 9039 movement and all the necessary specs you want to see in a proper dive watch. Jack Mason has also begun American wristwatch assembly as well as regulating timepiece movements in-house. With more enthusiast-based watches coming down the pipeline this year, be sure to check out their website at jackmasonbrand.com. Sign up for their newsletter to stay up to date on product drops and other Jack Mason brand news.
Hanhart, a brand that to my mind just doesn't get enough love. But you've been trying out these 417 ES's flybacks, two sizes. Size seems to be a bit of a theme, 39 and 42. Would you lean towards the 42, the 39, or actually neither of them?
That's a good question. So this is the second time I've taken a look at the Hanhart Pioneer 417 ES. The new versions are called the Flyback. The first version was called the 1954. It's a little bit confusing, very minor differences between these models. But in essence, it takes a Hanhart watch that they made in the early 1950s, which really looks like it should have come out in the 1940s because it's based upon a design from them, I believe. And they remade it today. Hanhart has a lot of real, legitimacy as being a pilot watchmaker, and so this is something that they really made. And this is a particular style of classic Flieger watch, which I just think is handsome, and they seem to know that. And what they've done is they just sort of tried to make enough variety for everyone's taste. So it begins with a manually wound version of the Sellita SW 510, which is nice because there's a display case back on some of them. That's actually interesting. They don't all have display case backs, and you can see the movement, which is pretty nicely done. And again, it feels like the original. I mean, I would have preferred an automatic, but I get it. And you have versions with an all black dial. Then you have the ones with the black dial and the white subdials, or the white dial with the black subdials, and it comes in, as you said, a 39 or a 42 millimeter wide case. What do I prefer? I actually don't dislike the 39 here, especially on the Boon. The Boon makes it wear larger. It's also on the thicker side because, it's a chronograph, the SW510, even though it doesn't have the automatic rotor. It's still... it's still a thicker movement. So for me, the actual 39 is nice. I prefer that one because the 42 on the Boon strap is a bit on the larger side for me. But if I had to take it off the Boon, it would probably be the larger size. But again, that's one of the ones where I found myself wearing the 39 more. The newer versions of it have a flyback movement. And the smaller case is anti-magnetic and it has the closed case back, and the 42 is the one that has the display case back. So there's a little bit of variety there. Price was a bit over $2,000, I think. It felt like a good package, and it was sort of an interesting thing for Hanhart to do, sort of come back out with that. But look, this is the time where there's still a huge amount of fervor for vintage designs. Less and less people want the actual vintage design. So these newly made watches that are modern in most respects, materials, construction, movement, but these vintage designs, this is a very ripe area right now commercially. And I think every brand that can do it should get in on it for a while. So Hanhart's doing the right thing.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hanhart, particularly actually the Primus Desert Pilot. I particularly like one of the most legible chronographs I've ever handled. David, experiences of Hanhart?
Yes, I've had them in for a photo shoot a number of years ago, 3-4 years ago, and I've been in love with them ever since. I think these are excellent watches, and I agree that they are underrated. And it's the typical thing. It's like, people find this online and then they go and then they pull the trigger and then it's just a great watch to have. And then you have to explain to everybody why it's a great watch. Especially this 417 ES. I think it's a great watch that's vintagey without being like, trying too hard. Wears great, not too large, not too small. It's its own thing. I think it's a great watch.
Any particular thoughts on why Hanhart isn't getting the love? It just seems to continually bubble under.
I mean, look,
when brands like Oris and others seem to have risen above the rest.
Well, as I was about to say, and I think it's a good point, Rick, but we just spent the better part of the show on eBay looking at a bunch of watches that are cool that haven't got a lot of love. And I think that's really the important thing to point out, is that in the watch world today, you need two things. You need a good product, and you need to have brand desirability. And you can't have just one. Rolex is a great example. Huge brand desirability and a superlative product. There's flaws, but they make a great watch most of the time. And so I think that that's really what we're demonstrating. So when you have a watch that's a great product, but an undesirable brand, you have this situation where we're all like scratching our heads. Well, how come more people don't know about us? Well, because there's such a small amount of weirdos like us that spend our free time on eBay looking at undiscovered watches. Like, there are some, but admittedly it's a small amount, because most of the people who are on eBay looking at watches are looking for things that they already know about. So this is like, niche within a niche, and that's okay. But I think that explains why there isn't more fervor around this, because these brands, for whatever reason, didn't get popular. Either they didn't get lucky, as many brands do, where there's some famous reason for their watches to be known, like with Doxa being incorporated in the Clive Cussler books. That's sort of like luck. Or they spend a lot of money to get known. But absent luck or spending and effort, the mainstream just isn't going to know about most of the good watches out there.
Final watch chat for today will come courtesy, and I suppose we've gone a bit full circle here, starting off talking about large and small watches, but it will be with Panerai. David, you did a hands-on chat about the Panerai Radiomir California, the PAM 1349. What do you think of California dials, first of all?
I love them. If I were to get a Panerai, it would definitely have one of these California or so-called error-proof dials, I think, and they are fantastic.
And what do you think of the Radiomir in general?
Yeah, I think the Radiomir is underrated a little bit. I think it's a cool thing for those who are yet to see a California dial. It's where the indices and the top half of the dial are in Roman numerals, and in the bottom half, lower half, are Arabic numerals, and it's a cool little thing. And Periscope has done this great article that is about the history of these and how these are linked to the war and to Rolex, and how it was designed and patented by Rolex, actually, this dial design, and how it was then handed over to Panerai. And yeah, it has its own history, and I think that's cool, and it looks amazing too on the wrist, and it's great to look at. So yeah, error-proof dials, or California dials, are a great addition to any collection. And this one, I think that the Radiomir case responds really well to this tumble brushed finish. I think it's when we were at Watches and Wonders and we were looking at all the novelties from Panerai, I immediately migrated towards this one, because I thought it was just one of the cooler watches out there. It's $12,300, and I do have some points of criticism, mainly about the movement. It's just one giant plate that covers almost all of the movement, and it's just not that nice to look at for 12 grand. It should be more detailed and more nuanced. And on the case back itself, there's this really cool script in this old school, like 1930s typography that says Panerai Radiomir. And I thought it would be great to see the brand match the typography on the movement, since it's basically all text that you have to look at if you're looking for decorations, to match the typography there. And I feel like we should be pushing some of these brands to do more for 12 grand. This is a great watch, but it would be even better if it had a little bit more of a cohesion between movement and case and little details like that, especially for this much money.
Yeah, I mean, you've posited recently that 12 grand is the new 7.5 grand,
yes,
or 13 grand, and I think you're right. I think you could absolutely see this watch being 7 grand 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I think you're right that the case back is what you see is disappointing. I think it would have been interesting to take that plate and actually give it the same treatment as the case. That would have been interesting. But to have this shiny base plate while you're looking at a brushed steel rest of watch just seems a bit odd. Just seems a bit, as you say, discombobulated, disjointed.
Yes.
And it's almost not worth having. You would have been better almost with one of those kind of, highly decorated Panerai case backs that you sometimes see when they have these kind of half hunter cases from back in the day. Ariel, are you a Panerai? You like big watches, but are you a Panerai fan?
I think a lot of Panerai watches look really, really cool. I'm also amongst the people who has a bit of an issue with the pricing, but I'll readily admit I'm not necessarily the target demographic. When you don't understand a brand's pricing, it usually means that they're not trying to sell to you, and I think that that's probably a lot of what's going on here. And you notice that a lot of brands sort of swoop in and they offer substantially similar wearing experience, case size, kind of design, movements in a lot of ways for a lot less, especially when it comes to sort of the simple three-hand or basic complications. Panerai tried to assert themselves in their higher price points in a lot of ways with in-house movements and then a lot of sophisticated fancy movements. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's what most people want out of the brand. It's not necessarily the complications. It's just sort of that core military style, and I think no one really feels that it needs to cost that much. So it's sort of what people want out of Panerai isn't what Panerai itself wants to sell from its profit goals and things like that. So I think that there's a little bit of that inherent conflict of interest in there, and I think that that's different with other brands. You look at Vacheron, which is another Richemont Group brand, which is a company where people want to spend more on because they want to see things like a lot of polishing, complications, fancy movements. It makes more sense when you look at the brand character and sort of the average price point. So I think that is a challenge that exists for a lot of the watch lover traditionalists. I think that companies like Panerai, I think that there's, new people that they can always go out to and, a fresh consumer, new blood, as they say. And maybe that helps them. And also they get into issues where they can't really go backwards. And so there's these trends. They want to, make as much money. They're not selling as many watches and they get to a certain price point. And then I think they get stuck. It's almost like you speed up the car, but the brakes are broken and like you can't really go any slower. So I it's hard for me to predict exactly what's going on in there, but my suspicion is that a lot of the people internally at Panerai agree with us, but there's not a lot of clear-cut ways on how to do that.
Good. Well, go and check out David's article. It's a really good one, and if I do say so myself, it is a really lovely watch. But then I am a Panerai fan, so there you go. Gentlemen, that is us for this week. We already touched a little bit on what you're up to in this coming week, but is there anything else exciting in the inbox that you're looking forward to in the world of watches?
Just more watches.
More watches. Do we have any insight into anything that may be coming, any brands to watch out for at Couture?
I love how, sometimes for you, Richard, the next best watch is the one that, that doesn't exist yet. You're like, screw all the watches that are available. Anything cool coming?
Anything cooler than this?
Like,
is the coolness meter increasing?
It maybe Seiko's rubbing off on you where you're just getting excited about the next thing. Like, I understand from a news perspective why we always want to talk about what's next, but I feel that the wisest thing we can sometimes do is enjoy what's out right now, because that's how stuff gets missed. That's how we find these, incredibly high discounts on eBay sometimes, because the people are so obsessed with okay, I like it in orange. Is it ever going to come in this other color? Like, maybe you should play with it in orange for a while and see how you feel. The slowing down your time is, maybe some good advice. There will always be new things coming. What I like is when I go to these events and I have no idea. I want to be surprised. David already knows everything about this Piguet event. Like, they would have sent me this stuff. I'd be like, yeah, I'm not looking at it. Like, I want to be surprised once in a while. And I think the brands actually appreciate when people want to be surprised. So, I think I like to keep it that way, where this stuff comes in the inbox. I'm like, whoa, what the hell is that?
Well, we'll just cancel next week's show and you can still go back and look at the old articles. Maybe we'll do a show one week where there are no new watches. We just have to find stuff that didn't get the coverage we thought it deserved from, pick a year.
Any given year, there's probably about 50 watches that we shot and that we could have written about that we didn't. Right? Probably about 50 a year or so. So there's actually a lot of, the watches that aBlogtoWatch forgot. That could fill up many shows.
Well, I think we might have a wee section coming on that because that sounds like quite good fun. David, where can we find you on the internet?
It's ABTW_David, and I wanted to add that, there's like a 9 out of 10 chance that whatever it is that you're expecting from the next watch that you're hoping for a brand to release, it's already been done. And there's a 6 out of 10 chance that it's on eBay.
Well, so today's recommendation, and this is not part of a sponsor's message, even though there may well have been an advert from eBay in the show, is go and check out eBay. Ariel, where can we find you on the internet this week?
You can read my articles on aBlogtoWatch.com. More video reviews coming on our aBlogtoWatch.com YouTube channel, the Superlative Podcast, in addition to the Blog2Watch Weekly Podcast, and on Instagram at Ariel2Watch.
Excellent. You can find me at RickTikTok. Thanks for listening. Tune in again next week. Goodbye.
Have a good
Bye,
one.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.